All right. Thank you all for attending. I know this is a late day, so hopefully it will be worth your while, and we'll get started here right now. So my name's Randall Brooks. I work for a Raytheon company, and I spent a lot of time looking at security in a lot of different systems for customers, external, internal, all sorts of types of things. And I actually get to train folks. So I spend a lot of time, looking at problems and finding out solutions and creating training courses along that. I trained everything from basically just looking at architecture to basically reverse engineering things. So it's a lot of great fun. And so I'm here with my co-presenter. I'll let him introduce himself.
Sure. My name is Shawn Harris, and I am the Managing Principal Security Architect at Starbucks Coffee Company. I have, over the course of my career, worked in a lot of different sectors, one of which is the federal government and the executive branch with NASA. I worked in the financial services arena with Progressive Insurance, entertainment for both MPEG LA, a licensing firm, as well as Lionsgate Studios and Stars Entertainment. And most of what we're going to be talking about today are some of the things that we discovered years ago while I was working for some of those other companies. Starbucks, we're still on our journey, so.
Yeah, and I was mentioning to Shawn earlier this year that we had sat through a lot of talks. I heard a lot of people talking about the idea of DevSecOps. And so we came up with this idea, and we wanted to, we're going to give it to y'all. It's called "It's in My Backlog: The Truth of DevSecOps," and everything is always in our backlog, and it never ever seems to end. So we'll get going. So just as a disclaimer, we are only speaking for ourselves, not our companies or anything along that line. Is there anything else you want to add?
Nope, that is absolutely the truth. And the next slide is that we also are not speaking on behalf of the CSA, Cloud Security Alliance. We're both very active with the CSA, and they have a DevSecOps working group, which is a really great opportunity. I'm the co-chair of the CCM working group, and Randall is on that working group as well as a few others, but we're also not representing the CSA for this talk.
However, they lovingly sit in the front row. So we do actually have the Cloud Security Alliance in attendance in the front row. So if you guys are interested in a very good organization, it's really how Shawn and I really got to know each other, was through a CSA event, and then we met at a conference because of it. And so it's been a really great group to get involved with. They are the largest group of cloud security experts there are, and so they work on a lot of, they have a lot of working groups, a lot of different technologies that they delve into. I do microservices, and I've been working in the top threats working group. We have some of the leads here from that group here today, and so we would always recommend folks get involved with the Cloud Security Alliance, and it's really been a fun group to get to know and get involved with. And yeah, we're actually we're the company, the corporate representatives. So for my company, I'm the representative, and Shawn is.
And I'm the representative for Starbucks.
Yep. So really today, we'd really like to delve into what DevSecOps really is, and how you can seamlessly integrate cybersecurity across everything that you do. And we're even going to talk about some AWS tools to do it. Now, I will note, it was funny, we were both at the keynote today, and I'll tell you, we both actually are very much in agreement with the keynote, and that there really isn't DevSecOps, really.
Right.
Yeah, so we're gonna delve into that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've looked at over time is, what is DevSecOps? And we've heard anything from it's securing DevOps, or it's just security ops, or it's a secure development lifecycle. So there's a wide variety of things that it could potentially be. And as you are really, and so I love the term building security in. So I like the idea of building security into a DevOps process. And if you're doing that, or even if you're doing something very closely related to it, like Agile, what are those practices you do? And this, by the way, this is the talk in a nutshell. So everything that we're going to talk for the next hour is summed up in this one slide, because we cannot emphasize enough that building security into the things that you do, at least from the ground up, is the #1 thing that you can possibly do. And I really love getting involved with the dev side. And I think, Shawn, you're a little bit more on the ops side.
Bit more of the ops side.
Yeah. And
yep. And so one of the key things to take away from this talk, that we're looking for people to take away from this talk, is the idea that security requirements are foundational in nature. I mean, how many people have, and this is very interactive, just because it's 6:15. Right? So very interactive.
Yeah, we would love people's input.
Like, raise your hands. How many people like just get a shiver up your spine every time an application team tells you that all of your security requirements are non-functional? Like, I hate that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's not like, okay, but you can't go to production until you meet that non-functional requirement because cloud. So.
Because reasons, absolutely. And of course, AWS does offer some great tools that we're going to talk about right towards the end that will help you put together a DevOps process. So to be honest, we'll kind of jump a little bit into that, in that there's a million different ways to get to the end of that tunnel. We'll show you one, but I'm sure that everyone has a different way to do that. So.
Yeah.
And actually, Shawn and I actually looked specifically for talks here at reInvent, where people were going out a certain part of it, like, I can automate this with this AWS tool. And those were really great talks in some cases.
There's plenty of technical descriptions on how to do DevSecOps, or integrating security into a DevOps pipeline. Did any of you, were you in Shannon Leatt's talk this morning about securability? Really great talk. Shannon Leatt's is kind of a luminary in the DevSecOps world, and so we'll talk a little bit about her manifesto. But if you ever have a chance to attend one of her technical talks about how to integrate DevSecOps, it's great. There's so much already that has been talked about, with exactly all of the technical pieces are there. What we're going to talk a little bit about is, there's the people, process, and technology, the three-legged stool. Technology, that stool leg is always great. What we're going to talk a little bit about today is that process and people, which is something that we feel is really, really important as you start to make the move into that more of that DevSecOps world.
All right. So this is just an agenda slide. We had to fill it out because it was in the template. So we'll go on to the next one, which is, funny enough, entitled the same as the first line on there. So. We'll jump right into it.
Right, and so this is basically DevOps. Anyone in here followed the DevOps Bible before? Right, DevOps, ops included security. But guess what happened? Security in the three-legged stool for DevOps. Security was the thing that got thrown on the backlog, right? And so, when I first heard of DevSecOps, one of my first reactions was like, well, no, it's part of the ops. It's already there, like the security guy, like, it's already there.
Right.
And then I start going to more conferences, start talking to people, and you have to meet your application teams, your solution teams where they are. And I start hearing that they're talking about security in the middle of their DevOpsy thing. So I've got DevSecOps. I'm like, okay, I'm totally cool. You're talking about security, we're going to add it in. We're going to talk about it. And so at this point, what we're looking to do is meet our customers, our application teams, exactly where they are. And so they're kind of getting past some of the DevOps, DevSecOps. Yeah, security is supposed to be in the ops, but in practice, that's where we see that it's not necessarily put in. And that's the whole title of the talk, is product managers find a way to put that into a backlog, because there's a lot of other functional things that they're driving for in that release.
All right. So actually, when I first heard the term, at least specifically with DevOps, I have seen, and I've done a lot of code reviews, a lot of looking for really, I use the term common weaknesses. So there's a technology out there, or a term called common weakness and enumeration. So CWEs was like all I lived that day in and day out. So for me, the sec part was the dev part. Like we're basically building security into the code. We're making rugged code, or we're basically going through good, AppSec, software assurance processes to build the code as best I can. And when I heard about DevOps, I'm like, oh great, they're really gonna like stamp out code super fast. That sounds great, but what if it's bad code really fast, right? So you're gonna get a bunch of bad code out into ops, and that is maybe not necessarily the threat environment that you need that code to be. So running in. So integrating the idea of really having security as a part of just the seamless process and how things work really had a nice draw for me personally, because I have worked in ops. I've actually deployed security ops centers and things like that. And recently I have to spend that time with development, and it was kind of like bringing it back to where I had started off with and saying, okay, what I can do can really start to build into that. And so we have this little graphic down here, DevOps, this continuous loop, right? Because it's all part of that continuous integration, continuous delivery thing that we're trying to get to. What we had actually in here, and I'll actually describe a photo that I wanted to keep, but I didn't have the rights to. But if you ever find it, I think it's the funniest slide. It's a unicorn. And it has, you write DevOps on the unicorn, and of course unicorns drop rainbows, and here's security coming to help that out. And so the security guy's got rainbow stuff coming up his leg because he's trying to solve that problem. So I thought that was an awesome photo. I could never get it approved.
Right. Yeah, it's all unicorn and rainbows.
Yep. All right, so some of the challenges or cultural change, this actually comes from that DevSecOps.org manifesto, leaning in over always saying no. So everyone always, so just as in that graphic, security's coming in, they're coming to help. Like we're security, we're here to help, we're here to say no to basically everything that you want, right? Everyone, some people are shaking their head and they're like, okay, that's definitely was on the checklist, right? So, everyone always comes in and says, oh no, you're gonna get exploited, or you're basically writing an ODA for this piece of code, why are you doing that? So don't put that out there. But starting to work with those groups and really kind of getting rid of that FUD, looking at the science on what is it that you're delivering, and understanding how does that impact, and kind of getting to really the bottom bullet on the left side is, and this is something we always forget about, the business. The business cares about making money, and I always love being the super secure person, right? So you basically the system's so locked down, you can't do anything, but the thing is you can't do anything, and that's not good, right, unfortunately. And so you need to work with the business and do what, services that they need that's going to help make them money and help them get the technologies and data that they need for, if it's statistical data about like what people are buying, that is very, very important to understand. And so working with them and being a part of the group is very, very useful.
Yeah.
So
I like to say that as security professionals, and I've been doing it for 20 plus years, as security professionals, if you look at kind of the security 1.0, we all followed the Church of No. Every time there was a new innovative thing that would show up, oh, well, there's this, and we think about all the misuse cases, right? Well, security 2.0, and I like to think that that's where we're going right now, or where we are, we have to stop attending the Church of No on Sunday and start following that Pope of pragmatism and start leaning in and having that conversation with our app teams, our solution teams. So, because if we really want them to take up the mantle of security, and honestly, there's no way to hire enough security people to scale with cloud. We all know that, right? And especially with the shortage right now. And so we have to actually kind of deputize these app teams. We have to get these solution teams in the mindset of security as a foundational requirement. And that's kind of one of the things that we've really done at several organizations that I've been at before. Compliance checklists. Like when you think about compliance checklists, I've got a control list, and in order for you to make it into the cloud with our account, with our brand, because our job is to protect our brand. That's the most valuable asset we have at Starbucks. To protect that brand, we have some bare minimum requirements that everyone needs to meet. Taking that from a checklist and expertise by proxy through an Excel spreadsheet into a compliance operation is so lifting for these application teams. They're like, wait a minute, you mean I don't have to go to another meeting? I don't have to fill out this thing and put a little X in the spot next to TLS again? We can just check that. We can check that through much of the automation routines that we can utilize nowadays. Like, this is really where security has to lean in and can lean in, so that we're no longer asking people questions in a meeting. Okay, and then we have to explain. If I have to explain, like back in the like 2015, 2014, if I had to explain one more time what SSL and TLS were to an application team, I was literally just about to lose it. And so now what we see is application developers are leaning into us. We've got to lean in to their side of the world as well. How many of you have heard the newer mantra, all security teams must be able to code, right? We've heard that, right? Mm-hmm. I counter that and I say absolutely, but guess what else they need to do? Security teams need to help application development leads ask good, honest, real security questions of the development staff coming into your organization. Because this is the developers, the app devs, and the SREs, DevOps team, they all have to understand security now. We have basically taken ourselves through Shannon Leatt's manifesto here into a world where security people are really training and scaling. We're training all of our application teams to pick up that mantle of security.
Yeah, and actually there was one that's been catching my eye, and I really have to bring it up because I'm actually a big fan of OWASP and a lot of the work that they've done. And one of the items that they have in the manifesto is about the APIs. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of great frameworks out there that will help people avoid the common problems that that are out there. And if you use secure functions, secure APIs, and just make it so the coder can code and not have security in his face saying, no, you can't do that, then it really helps build it in. And so as you're moving from that technical change and really in making that a part of the culture that they're working on, and we are trying to get to that, it's a cultural change, right? And so that is a really helpful and useful thing. And I really applaud groups like OWASP and other folks who out there put out free frameworks that are available to folks. And it's very, very useful and very helpful to do.
Right.
So, all right. So this is an example of a DevSecOps lifecycle. And there's always this one down there. We said we thought it was kind of missing is always that first step one, which is planning, building, test, release, deploy, and operate, and it continually goes. Mm-hmm. And the thing about the term lifecycle, it kind of brings you back to the horrible days of waterfall, right? It goes from this step, I did all my requirements, I spent months and months writing the code to meet that requirement, and then I tested it, yes, it passed that, I released it, everyone gives it thumbs up. Mm-hmm. And to me, this has really kind of moved more into like a phase that code goes to, because one of the things you want to do with DevOps is release more often. I'm blanking on the name of the paper, but there was a paper that came out, and the focus of it was 10 deploys a day. How in the world could you get to 10 deploys a day? That seemed impossible. But doing things that were manageable and were able to get through these all of these types of things and get it into the hands of the customer really had a foundational and really dramatic change in the way that the whole organization worked. And so This is really, you know, something that we had written up, basically kind of the way we kind of love to see, at least from a developer's perspective, because it's the developer's really value chain, right? It's from them really writing that code, the point in which they wrote it, they committed it into their source code repository, something automatically gets checked off, and then you know, they don't have to go to a third-party tool or something like that. Like, they don't need to go learn and log on to something like that. They do things such as static application security testing, which is a really wonderful thing that folks should be doing if you're not already, but that will look at code and basically look for things that I was referring to, common weakness enumeration, other OWASP type things, you know, coding errors that you possibly could do, and then there's points where you absolutely have to do peer review testing. And so when people come in and say, okay, I've got to have another set of eyes, and that's going to happen, unfortunately. Yep. But a lot of times when things aren't to that level, they can be automated. And one of the things that we would recommend is people develop bug bars. We always like to use the term secure coding standard. Well, the question is, what is your standard, right? So if you're going to say buffer overflows, no buffer overflows should ever be in my application. So if it passes that bug bar, there is no buffer overflow in that code, and then it's automatically ready to go. So developer, he's sitting back, he's already written his code, he's submitted, and all this is happening in the background. His code's been tested, it looks good. That stuff is automatically kicking off a test environment. Some people call it a QA environment or things like that, in which we do our security testing there too. And so that could be done with infrastructure as code, right, and deployed, and make it as such that it mirrors the production environment. I can't tell you how many times folks wrote code, throw it over the fence into ops, and the production environment, it broke immediately, right? That code is not going to work. So that's definitely not what you want to have. So that deployed code, it runs through all of the dynamic application testing. We love to use the technology Fuzz Testing. We fuzz the mess out of things. You know, we see what we can do to break that code, because we know when it gets out to the environment that it's going to run in. You know, if someone isn't attacking that code, they don't have the manual, they don't read, you know, the instructions on how to run the software, they will break it. And so trying to break it beforehand and doing that through automation really can help to get more rugged software out. And then if it passes that, it can be sent up to production environment, and then you can you know, go through continuous monitoring and keep going and keep that loop back up to that person's writing code again. And so that's kind of how we'd really love to get out there. That way that the code that the developer is writing gets the impact now. And so if it's not working, then we'll go ahead and make that change and so forth. So
judgment-free zone. So how many organizations actually have an application security team that does most of this for the devs, and the devs aren't actually doing it themselves, right? There's lots of that, right? Yeah. Now, think to yourself the cultural change that needs to occur within security and within the rest of IT in order to enable this kind of innovation within the application teams. What kind of training regimen will have to occur so you can teach what the application security team knows after they've been doing it for 10 years into that app team? How can you take that knowledge and train the application team who maybe kind of likes what they're doing right now, but the problem is it's that scale. So that innovation at scale is what we're really talking about being able to do, and it's a cultural change. There's not a technical limitation to do this. It's about cultural change. It's about understanding that the responsibility for doing security is distributed, and with that comes some accountability distributed within IT leadership, right? It's not just the CISO's job to be accountable for all security for everything. The buck still stops with him. He's on the incident calls, but it's something to think about. Like, how can we motivate that cultural change within our organizations so that we can start to enable our app teams to do the kind of great work that our application security teams do? Because, like, I don't know about you guys, but like every time I've seen an organization like that, the application security team are the busiest people in the world, right? They're trying to keep up and the JIRA tickets, and then you actually get, interestingly enough, backlog on the application security team in order to get to the next thing, and they start prioritizing their work. So what we need to do, that's what this is all about, is enabling all of these application teams to be able to start doing this.
Right, right. Also, it's in your backlog, and it's never
the backlog.
It's never going to get done. Never ever.
Blockchain.
Blockchain. Yeah. Thank you for that. So we have a section in here, and we're going to try to solicit your opinion on the next couple of slides. We'll kind of open it up, and if you guys want to, say something, I think we were asked actually to repeat if someone says something in the audience for the recording there. When Shawn and I came up with the idea, we actually started with this particular section here because everyone's been talking about DevOps and in general, or DevSecOps. And what is it? Which one is it? And so in our humble opinion, we have a couple set of slides. So we have the apples and oranges, right? We're going to start off with what maybe is not DevSecOps. And I'm going to say maybe, because it may be, right?
Right.
So the first one is DevOps. Is DevSecOps DevOps?
Is it securing DevOps? Is it DevOps with security rolled into the ops side? Mm-hmm. So like to hear what some other people kind of are thinking, because this is one of those terms that can be kind of buzzwordy, but also it's a real thing. So like to hear someone like what you think. Where do you feel what does DevSecOps mean to you?
Automating security operations.
Automating security operations.
That was another one we had. Definitely had that on the list. So some of the ones that we have here, is DevSecOps Agile, and some companies' application security team process, or their SDL or something like that. Is just static code analysis DevSecOps, or just ops in general, right?
Right. And that's really interesting because in a white paper that's out for peer review right now with the CSA, they actually draw a distinction between DevSecOps and SecDevOps, which is where they start to think about like security DevOps,
and securing DevOps, your actual DevOps pipeline. Yeah, that was one we didn't put on here. It almost made the cut.
And it's kind of like, well, there's all these terms, and like we need to all figure that out. But from that perspective, automating your security functions at this point in time is security, right? And so my thoughts, at least in the DevSecOps world, is how do we get application teams like starting to think about security? All of our security teams have to start thinking about how to automate in the same way that application teams have been doing for their own workloads.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, and then the last one on there, and I'm sure you guys have heard this term, water, scrum, fall. Has anyone ever heard water, scrum, fall confused with the idea of DevOps or DevSecOps? I personally actually have quite often, and so just talking through folks in the community, and I think that really kind of gets into Agile, right? Agile has been often used as this is my secure part, or at least my dev portion of DevOps. And Agile is definitely an enabler of DevOps in general. Mm-hmm. But I guess in my humble opinion, it is not DevSecOps, at least.
Right. No, not specifically. It can enable if you are doing a full digital transformation and making that migration into like that full Agile culture change. Does that enable DevSecOps or integrating security into the DevOps cycle? Absolutely, right? Because everyone is already starting to think about that short turnaround, that iterative approach. But with specifically Agile isn't necessarily just integrating security in. How many of you in the early 2000s we're on a project to integrate security into your organization's SDLC. Like, I did that.
Yep. No, yep. Definitely.
Oh, today? Yeah, see? And so this is all about that. This is like, well, now all of our organizations, they left their SDLC kind of behind a little bit. They still have one, but they kind of left it behind because now it's iterative, and we're talking about hours of iterating, figuring out what's wrong, what's not wrong. Does that stick to the wall? Nope, let's go back. Now, when does threat modeling happen in there, right? When is the security architects involved? Because we have to now engage with product managers as much as we have to engage with the engineers who are developing code, because the product managers are the ones in most organizations that are now determining, well, I'm measuring the work, this all needs to go back, this is all on the backlog until we release. It's like, well, we're back in that old world of trying to now integrate things into that SDLC process. And the thing that security people hate the most, at least all of the people that work with me and have worked with me over the years, is, I don't know, they're going to release this tomorrow, so now they told me that I need to check it today. Wait, what?
Yeah.
And so this is our opportunity as the culture is changing around us for us to lean in and be able to make this change.
Okay. And so on this particular slide, because we don't necessarily know if we're right. One of the biggest posture, at least on the first one, if you notice, it said, this is not, like, DevSecOps is not DevOps. Well, actually, in my humble opinion, it's DevOps, and it's just DevOps. And I really appreciated the keynote this morning when I think he said there is no Sec and DevOps, is DevOps, and I was like, yes, absolutely, because that's how I personally feel. If we can integrate security into how we do business, how we do everything, writing code, operating code, testing code, all of that is just seamless, soup to nuts, no issue, not in your face, not there saying no every time, and just working with you, then that's where I want to be. And I think that's very, very important. And so is there any other ones, like if any, what is DevSecOps? Maybe something we've missed here. Yeah. DevQAOps, yes.
It's ridiculous. No, you just need to do DevOps the proper way.
Yes.
You need to sprinkle securities in all the components.
Absolutely. Sprinkle security in all the components. And I totally agree. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. So let me see if I can.
So if ops covered security already, if I can paraphrase, if ops covered security already, we wouldn't all have vulnerability management programs because it'd be already taken care of.
Well, that would be awesome. Right?
So there still is that need for security people to lean in and come up with things and meet our customer where they are, even if I have to swallow a term like DevSecOps in order to do it. Okay, I don't care. What I really want is a much longer MTB LOS, mean time between loss of sleep. If I can get that, you can call it Bob. Dev Bob Ops if you want, but that's
Bob Ops. You heard it here first,
thing.
guys.
Yeah, right.
Dev Bob Ops. So we're going to credit you for that one. That's awesome. All right.
Question.
Oh, one over here. So the question is, do we embed security, like a security expert, into all the other teams and so forth? I can tell you that, and I'll ask Shawn what his opinion is. And I mentioned earlier, I lead a group. I'm the director of something called the Cyber Center of Excellence, and one of the things we own is training. and I get to train everyone, basically. I've way too many number of people, and it's really can be any particular level. And I think one of the things that the way we had particularly looked at the problem was we want to train everyone at all levels. I mean everyone, right? Just name, even if it's supply chain, supply chain, people buying you stuff. We want them to have the appropriate knowledge that they need to have that capability. And we also like to build in tools that automate things and just get it out of their face. Like, we don't want the big red stop button to pop up in front of them for doing everything. Unfortunately, as a security practitioner, I'm outnumbered. There is a whole lot of people that aren't security practitioners, but we want everyone to be that. So if we can get them some baseline knowledge and have at least a place where they can reach out to for help, then we can go and help them. And if you can, embed a person in there, I think that would be helpful. I don't know your thoughts.
So I've seen some organizations embed security, application security engineers directly with the teams that they're already working with hand in hand. The skills shortage comes into play there, I think, a bit. And so I've also seen organizations fire up entire learning journeys that are application security learning journeys, and you take the people who are already embedded, say engineers, we've got engineers who are very, very interested in security. You can take those and you can kind of formulate that into like a security champions program, reward them for being your security hand embedded in those teams already,
That's
and that
right.
really helps.
Yeah, I've actually heard that's a good one, yeah. That is a quandary, yeah. It was developer security or security developing. Yes.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah. I was a firewall administrator in 1998 at Marshall Space Flight Center, NASA. I'm not a real good dev. I can tell you how it works, what's going on. I can make sure that we're hiring the right people for the right things, but our application teams, they are so close already. So you can just do like that champions program, or you can do a learning journey for them to bring them along over into that security realm. But you have to have that with some form of a reward as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's a good one. And there's a lot of secure coding, things that you can buy, those training packages and folks that, they can spend 5 minutes finding out what a buffer overflow is and things like that. All right, we'll do one more question and I think we gotta move on.
Not a question, but more of a side note. You can teach a security guy development. You can teach development to a security guy. It teaches empathy.
Empathy?
You've done 10 years of no sleep and waking up at 2 a.m. on your kid's birthday, or unless you had to sit through a security review where they basically told you you can't do any of this,
Yeah.
you're not going to get a good program. Security champions taking it to making them security is, in my mind, the way to go.
Yeah.
Because you can't teach them empathy. They already know what it's like to say no. They know what it's like to hear no, so they're not going to do that, and they're going to strive to do better and offer suggestions and have forward.
Yes.
More than just, you can't do this and ask the butler.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And so, his point was you can't teach empathy, and in having that experience is very, very important. All right. So, how could one go about this journey? If you were starting day one, you've like, wow, I've never even heard of DevOps, and I'm coming to the AWS conference. This is my first day. I don't even know where to begin. We're going to go through very quickly something that you might want to take a look at. One of the first things that you do probably need is a secure development lifecycle. And this is Microsoft's, what they call that their Microsoft SDL. If you know, back in the day, Microsoft had a few issues with some of their software, and Bill Gates put out a wonderful memo that basically said, we're going to train everyone, and so we're going to come up with a secure way to build our products. And as I mentioned earlier, this is maybe phases in which code can go through, but there's some great stuff in here that I would recommend folks take a look at, which includes like the bug bars and doing attack surface analysis, right? Looking at how can your system be attacked. A lot of people really skip that one. A lot of people don't do threat modeling. And so if you're not going to architect it and design it correctly, it's going to fall down eventually. And that's a very important thing up front. And then doing that static analysis, dynamic analysis, and they even throw in fuzz testing, so I really liked it, of course, because they said that. And so on the outside, they have training, and then they have the response, responding to when something bad happens, that you actually go ahead and patch the code. And you integrate that all together with your life cycle, with your development, your operations, and so forth. That is a good first place to take a look at. And then it's a little bit about cultural change.
It is. So integrating, as we spoke about, you can integrate your SRE or your DevOps teams directly into that integrations planning, having being like the architecture guy, having patterns that people can go to, and they know that this is an approved pattern, we can utilize this, and we're good to go. We don't have as much to deal with. But guess what? If you're a special flower, and if you're if you're going to basically work and build like a block of Velveeta craft cheese that's manufactured. Every week we're doing that same thing. That's a whole lot different of a security conversation than that team that is going to make that an artisanal cheese that's grown in a cave somewhere in Northwest Oregon. It's a very different thing. That's going to need an awful lot of lean in from the security team. But if you're just building straight up EKS, we already know exactly the patterns that you can use. Those dev teams already know it, and then they can focus on their code. So they're not doing as much work, say specifically because the threat models can be slightly different based on adversarial intent, but by and large, that can be just redone. And just developing security as code is a very huge thing. One of my friends has a startup that is doing compliance checks as code. So when E&Y shows up, there's no more screenshots. It's, here, run this, pull it out, here you go. And I just spent 5 minutes doing what I had to have an engineer sit there and do screenshots for an hour. So things like that is where we're going, developing compliance as code and security as code. Security rules and security boundaries as code is exactly where this is going.
All right, so, like I said, I love to use the word building security in. So start with baby steps. Start to embed that static code analysis into the way that you write your code. So you push that button, and it just goes off. There's a lot of plugins for whatever IDE that you're using that can integrate with a whole host of static analysis vendors. I think there's a couple on the show floor out there today. And then you can start to add some of your operational security controls, and then start to do the next and most important step, which is to automate. And just kind of a note, there's a lot of different types of automation out there. Probably, I think the biggest word I think that's been said at the conference this year, or at least so far, has been AWS Lambda. So where you can write like little functions to do, little things that you like to do. But of course, there are, things that are your manual processes. You can start to really delve into. Usually as a developer, I always hated doing things twice. Right. And so if there's something I can automate or write a script for, we will do that. And I think we're a big believer in Python, I think. So we love the Python, so.
Just earlier today in the same room, Jacob Bornelson spoke about what they've done with Demisto at Pokemon Go. I don't know if any of you attended that. I thought it was really, really interesting how you can see that automation take hold in their team, because he mentioned it, very small team, and they're killing it by doing a lot of automation, and it's really having a big impact in their team.
Yeah, he was kicking off like request events and is going off. I thought that was a really great talk, and he was developing his full playbooks. If you guys aren't familiar with the term playbooks, that basically is the checklist that you probably went through day in and day out. Like, oh my gosh, I got an antivirus set an alert off. What am I going to do? You can automatically go and find those viruses, check it against virus total, go see if there's a indicator of compromise in your system, and go scan your environment for that particular event. And all of this can be done through playbooks. And so the things that you guys do day in and day out can be automated and very well scripted. Now, sometimes you have to have some interaction points where you do need to have a human in that loop and do that work. So yeah.
And getting to kind of the security nerd in me, one thing that I think is super, super interesting that some organizations are starting to do is they're using automation as basically playbook automations to test their current control set against the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Got a system here doing automation, a system here doing automation. Let me test in between. Am I covering the tactics?
All right, so of course there's always governance, and there's a lot of different governance bodies out there that you might be or have to deal with, you don't. I guess what I'm saying is you don't want this to be a checklist. Like, I have to go check. I want to make this as part of how I do things to be automated and a part of how you do business. Here's a list of a lot of the great big ones. Of course, the Cloud Security Alliance puts out a lot of great stuff that we have out there. I personally get to spend a lot of time looking at NIST documents. I email, as soon as NIST comes out with a special pub, I find out who the author guy is. One of my other roles I get to do is I'm our representative to a group that votes on ISO standards. And so in the international standards bodies, I know a lot of NIST people because of it. So when NIST comes out with a special pub, I'll read through that document and figure out, how can we make this a part of how we do, what we want to do and make it secure, and then of course flows into FedRAMP and other things along that line.
And being a retailer, PCI is pretty important.
Yes.
There's actually a PCI board meeting here in Boston this week. So our organization will have representation there, as well as the CSA. Jim Rivas is there.
Oh.
So GDPR, how many of you have had to deal with GDPR from the cloud perspective? How many of you?
A lot of hands.
How many of you have defined what reasonable security controls are? Right? That's the regulatory kind of boondoggle. It's like, what is like reasonable security controls? I've had to work through the China cybersecurity law, mentions reasonable controls, PIPEDA, GDPR. The only record that at least I personally have seen of ever seeing where reasonable controls have been identified, and that was by the state of California in a brief by the Attorney General, stated that the CIS top 20, CIS Center for Internet Security, top 20 controls seem reasonable. And that's the only thing we have to go on. Other than that, it's just really going to be up to our organizations and the organizations that are coming in and auditing us against our reasonableness. So governance, it's CSA. We utilize CCM as kind of a foundational pinning for a lot of our cloud security controls. We and like I mentioned, I do a lot of volunteering with the CCM working group, and CSA is a really great organization.
Well, speaking of the CSA, we are a member, we're not the leads, but we are a member of the DevSecOps working group. And there is right now an open peer review on the 6 pillars of DevSecOps. It's out right now for comment. And these are the main 6 here. You'll kind of see some of the things that maybe have been repeated a little bit on some of the words that we've been saying, which is security is everyone's responsibility, right? So we want to make that a part of your culture. You know, collaborate, integrate, training, and making it, you know, teaching people and integrating it into their process and how they do things, super helpful. And so forth. And then there's, you know, obviously a few others in here, of course, automating and whatnot. So I recommend if you're interested in this type of thing, go just Google CSA and DevSecOps, and you'll find this document here, and provide comments to it and say there is no such thing as sec in DevSecOps. That would be hilarious, but
right. And number 6 here, measure. That's really one of the most important things there, because you know, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and you can't go to your CISO, your CEO, and say, hey, this project and this program we kicked off, we have so much success. We see a lot of people who care about security. Well, caring about security isn't necessarily a measure of success. Having fewer mean time between loss of sleep events, measure of success. You have to find a way to find metrics around your securability in DevSecOps. And I think there's going to be a white paper coming out soon at securability.io. We learned today from Shannon Leitz. And she's come up with a formula to try to determine some metrics in this space. It's a really hard thing, because just caring about it doesn't help me.
All right, so you've made it this far. We're going to talk a little bit about how this could be implemented in AWS.
So you can see the building blocks. We have infrastructure with the cloud formation, Terraform, Amazon EC2, ECS, EKS. Then as you move up that stack, getting into that config management with Puppet Chef, Ansible, OpsWorks, AWS Cloud Deploy, Jenkins build services, Lambda can be doing this deployment for you, and then into the monitoring aspect. And we've got the CloudWatch and Cloud Health and things like Alert Logic, who are on the floor. They do some of that monitoring perspective as well. And what we're just kind of showing here is like the hierarchy of, as you're building this program, we've talked a lot about people and process, right? We've got 10 minutes left. We've talked a lot about people and process because we feel that that's where all of this stuff you wouldn't be here if you didn't know how to do it. So this is where we're talking a little bit about it, but it's now just touch on it just a little bit. The idea of setting up your foundational operations concepts, and then do config management, and then get into how you're going to deploy, and how are you going to do some of the security checks within each of these steps. So we like to say that in, say, like the EC2 world, VMs, I get, every now and then I'll get someone at a conference or something, they'll talk about like some of their challenges, and challenges could be like, well, how do I get, I need to provision SSH access in EC2, and I often ask, well, why? If you're rolling your images and you're doing this in a constant deployment perspective, vulnerability management becomes a whole lot easier. Doing this and actually not treating these cloud resources as a resource. It just becomes something in the cloud. You're just rolling it through your CI/CD pipeline. You're doing a check of your YAML. You're doing a check of your containers going up inside your pipeline. And so your kind of your choke point, or your enforcement point, if you will, is that deployment step. Hey, am I checking this? Am I breaking builds? Am I breaking builds, or do I have the ability to break builds? If I don't have the ability to break builds, what kind of carrot do I have to ensure that everything is being addressed in a good way. And criticality of vulnerability definitely plays into that. All of you have probably seen this one before. This is an example of AWS Pipeline. It came from AWS. And what we're showing here is source stage coming out of your DevOps organization, sourcing through the code pipeline, and then it, coming down into the security groups are instantiated in code, and your code analysis is running in your commit stage. That rolls over into the test stage and you're doing further validation with Lambda code, and then you have that approval step. That approval step can be automated as well. Well, looks good. You're rolling pretty good here, and then you delete that stack from CloudFormation, move it on into the change set, and go and execute and deploy. This is the basic building block of what most people are utilizing today in AWS.
All right, and that's really it. And so we have just a few minutes for questions. So we can take maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then everyone will have a great night, I think.
How do you handle patching? Because patching is there, you want to be able to release the right version.
How do you handle patching? Yeah, is the question. I would say for us, we try to get it in as soon as possible. As soon as the patch comes out, to deploy that into a representative environment and test to make sure that it doesn't break anything, because we really need to get those out. I always have a joke that basically the way it goes is patch Tuesday, reverse engineering Wednesday, exploit Thursday. And so that timeline is very short. And so if you're doing true DevOps, you can do small deploys quickly, and you can get that very quickly into the environment. Now, the question is, are you going to do enough functional tests? And that's kind of a hard thing to measure on how much testing you're going to do to make sure it doesn't fall in. But if you're testing using the same as what's out in production, you're going to be in a much better benefit. One of the things I think we kind of went a little quickly over is kind of the idea of configuration management. In the book, the Phoenix Project, one of the greatest things that they were able to do, at least from the developer's perspective, was check out from source code a virtual machine that was the same as deploying. And so if they had to go and make that change or apply that patch to that particular system, they'd already have a really good idea of what that was going to look like. So,
and once your infrastructure is fully instantiated as code, you can roll up 5 or 6 new environments for different teams to address patches within these other lower environments that don't have customer or employee type data or real data in them. You can roll fairly quickly through a patching regimen, and some organizations that I've talked to actually have special teams that are handling the patching while the rest of the teams are driving on in CI/CD. So the idea of most OS patching at this day and age, it's going into this realm of it's an OS, it's throwaway. I've seen and talked to vendors who literally are just they roll whatever the most recent OS patches on a daily basis, so they don't have to have that. We're going to stop doing this for a little bit. Now we're going to do this because the app teams, the solution teams, dev teams, that's not helping them, right? They're in the mindset they're driving us and making and getting us some value. So another team steps in and says, SRE DevOps team, we're going to handle all of the patching, and then if it's actually in the application code, then if it hasn't been caught by your vulnerability in your fuzz testing, then that team spins that up as well.
Okay, well, I think that's about it. So thank you guys for attending, and I hope you guys have a good rest of the conference.
Thanks.
And thank you.